It's time for Recruiting Better with me, Ben Browning. For ambitious recruiters, it's never been tougher to get seen as a trusted advisor and true partner to your clients and candidates. Join me each week as I address your challenges head on, answering questions from recruitment consultants and business leaders, and introducing experts you can learn from whether you're looking to scale your billings or your business. So if you're looking for inspiration or insights to help you make more placements, win more new business, find more candidates, or simply replace long hours with smart moves, then stay tuned. Recruiting Better has got you covered.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Recruiting Better with me, Ben Browning. And this time I'm joined by the excellent Todd Caponi. Todd has written 2 award-winning books on transparency, and he's here to share with us why transparency sells better than perfection. In Todd's writing, which I've personally really enjoyed, there are lessons not only for recruiters in terms of the way that you market yourselves, in terms of the messaging you take to your clients and candidates, but also in the way you negotiate so you can get a better deal every time you're put in that position, all the way through to thinking about how we can understand motivation for leading teams and also leading candidates to secure better roles with your clients. Todd, thanks so much for making the time to join us today. It's great to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, and I can't wait to nerd out on this. You said transparency sells better than perfection. It also recruits better. It retains high-quality candidates better. It creates advocates better, so those recruits want to come to your company versus the other way around. So there's so much magic in it. It's the closest thing to a silver bullet I've found. And that's why I, like a lunatic, quit my job and wrote a book about it. So
there you go. There you go. Oh, look, you were talking of books. I was just going to mention this. People who follow my content, people who know me and know the show, know that I read quite a lot. I typically read 50 books in a year. And ever since I've been reading into sales, your 2 books really absolutely stand out.
Yes.
Transparency Sales changed the way I thought about selling, and the Transparent Sales Leader has prompted me to be really kind of determined to get you on the show. So, as I say, thanks for making the time. And look, before we get started, can I ask you a slightly obtuse question? I noticed something in the background. Was that a telephone?
yeah, so my joke is that when cool people are doing cool things on the weekends, I'm reading, so you're reading 50 books a year. I don't actually read current books anymore, partially because I like to come to my own conclusions. So I actually read behavioral science research because I'm a nerd. But my hobby is history of sales and sales leadership. And so I've got books, magazines, artifacts from the sales community from the late 1800s through the early 1900s. And yeah, that phone behind me, for anybody that's viewing this, is a restored 1908 phone from the Swedish American telephone company. I drove 3.5 hours each way to get it, but it's still, like, the handle rings. It's got the original wiring in it. Unfortunately, we can't do any calling from it. It's not actually hooked up to anything, but I think it's the coolest thing in the world, and my wife thinks I'm a lunatic.
Absolutely. And as much as anything else, as much as the guy who's bringing transparency to the modern world of sales, you're also, as you say, sales historian, and your podcast is a great listen for anybody else who's out there who's interested in the history of sales. And I guess in a way there's something about the history of sales that segues quite nicely into where we are today, and a little bit about the kind of the role of transparency in sales right now. So Can you join the dots for us there, Todd? What is it about the history of sales that feeds so nicely into the world of transparency?
Well, it's funny that we've always known that honesty sells better. And I'll explain what transparency is, because it's such an overused cliche word. It's used wrong all the time. So we'll get to that. But let's just tie this back for a second to history. I've actually got a digital version of a book that I got from the Library of Congress from the 1740s. And it's a business book, and it has a whole chapter dedicated to honesty and, merchant relationships, which was essentially selling back then. So we've always known that honesty is the right policy. Over the years, we just got away from that, right? We got away from this idea that the person that we're talking to is a human being. And I think one of my favorite rants has to do with this phone. In that, like today, we look at technology and say, wow, the sales world is in a sales revolution with technology, right? We're filling every remaining crevice with technology. Wow, it's a revolution. No. The biggest sales technology revolution happened on March 10th of 1876, when Alexander Graham Bell made the first telephone call. Like, it revolutionized sales outreach, but unfortunately, it also revolutionized sales in a negative way, that we kind of forgot that we're talking to human beings. And we forgot that we're connecting with individuals and trying to help them and be a service versus being a necessary evil by prioritizing scale and our numbers and our metrics instead of prioritizing the outcomes that our customers receive. And as a result, the whole sales community kind of went in the toilet, and we started prioritizing metrics and get the deal over being honest and being transparent. And again, thinking through the lens of the customer. So that's a little bit of my history rant, but the bottom line there is, even in 1916, sales was a trusted, respected, and actually admired profession, to the point where at the first sales conference that ever took place in July of 1916 in Detroit, the keynote speaker was the U.S. president at the time, Woodrow Wilson. Now imagine a president speaking at a sales conference today. Why? Because our country and every country was relying on salespeople doing right by their customers and raising all boats. So I think there's an opportunity to get back to that kind of admired lens that we used to have.
That's huge. That's huge. And I hear the repercussions of that and the tones of that in so much of what recruiters do right now. I mean, one of the other reasons that we're having this conversation is that I believe that recruiters create a huge amount of value for their clients, and yet they're not necessarily communicating that value perhaps as well as they might. And so let me ask you that question then about, you mentioned transparency, and it's an overused phrase perhaps, and perhaps it isn't, as you say, defined as well as it could be. What does transparency mean to you, Todd?
Well, yeah, I'll start with the story of what happened. So in my last role, I was the chief revenue officer of a tech company. I'm in Chicago, and the company was based here. It was called Power Reviews. And you could probably guess from the name that we were in the review space, right? We helped retailers and brands collect and display ratings and reviews on their website. So, you're buying a pair of Crocs and you look at the shoe and you scroll down and there's reviews. That was us doing the collect and display with them and 1,000 other retailers and brands. Here's what happened though. It was a few years ago. We had partnered with a local university. It's Northwestern University here in Chicago, on a research study that was simply looking at when a website's acting as a salesperson, in other words, just an e-commerce site, what do people do? How do they act? How do they consume? How do they trigger decisions? The research that came out of it, there was 3 data points. 2 of those data points changed my life. Like a lunatic, I quit my job and wrote my first book. And here are the 3 data points. And again, this is when a website's acting as a salesperson. I don't want you to get hung up on the reviews part of this, but here's what people do. Number 1, no surprise, was that we all read reviews today, right? Everybody who's listening, I'm sure that when you're buying something you haven't bought before, that's of medium to high consideration, meaning it matters, you probably read reviews. The number was 96% of us. But the 2 data points that changed my life. Number 1, 85% of us read the negative reviews first. Right? We skip the 5 stars and we go to the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s first. We're drawn to the negative first.
Okay.
And then the last data point that changed my life was that a product on a 5-star scale, and this is across all product categories, that's got an average review score between a 4.2 and a 4.5. That was actually optimal for purchase conversion, meaning a product that's got negative reviews sells better than a product that doesn't have negative reviews, that has nothing but 5-star reviews. And so I'm looking at that going, all right, that's what a website's acting as a salesperson. Cool. But why do we as human beings do that? And am I doing something wrong with my team? I got like 60 people right outside my office here that are presenting our solutions as, hey, we're perfect and they suck. right? And that was our approach to it. Is that wrong? So I started digging into the behavioral science, and I found really, really quickly that the answer is it's the way we're wired. We are wired subconsciously to know that perfection doesn't exist. And without that negative, without our ability to assess the downside, the risk, how an alternative might be better, our brain literally cannot trigger the decision when it's of medium to high consideration. You know, taking a new job, hiring a candidate, that's a big decision, right? You're making a big investment. And so if we're presenting our solutions as perfect, we're actually making it harder for decisions to get triggered versus easier. So we looked at that and I was like, what does that really mean? And that 4.2 to 4.5 is really important. The 85% leading with the negative, that's really important. We started trying it. And when I say trying it, I mean, looking through the lens of the customer, if I were in he or she's shoes, what kinds of information would I need to make a good decision, pro and con? And we went in and led with it, right? Like, hey, listen, based on our understanding of your requirements and what you're trying to achieve, we might not be the best at this part. Now, let's vet that. And then if you're cool with that, here's what we're great at. And here's why we're here and investing a time in you, because we think there's great alignment. But that one thing, if we were in your shoes, that might be something that we should be talking about. The results were literally magic, right? Win rates went up, qualified in deals faster, qualified out the deals we were going to lose anyway faster. Sales cycles shrank dramatically. We made it really hard on our competitors to message against us. And we built a whole foundation of a relationship on a bed of trust with our customers. And even when we lost, we got more referrals. We got brought into other areas of organizations. And I was like, this is insane. We became Chicago's fastest growing tech company from 2014 to 2017. And I was like, I got to get these ideas out there. And then that's really the story. The transparency is about, again, being a partner and being a service professional to your potential customer and helping them do the homework, right? The pros and the cons. It's not, like transparency can go wrong when you're sharing confidential, proprietary, personal information, stuff that literally arms your competitors to crush you. Like, that's not transparency. That's stupid, right? Like, take it easy. That 4.2 to 4.5 is really important, but bottom line, if the truth won't sell it, don't sell it. Lead with the truth.
Absolutely love that. What was that line again?
It's a quote from Arthur Dunn in his 1919 book, The Scientific Selling and Advertising. And the quote is my favorite sales quote of all time. And it is, if the truth won't sell it, don't sell it.
It's such a powerful refrain for right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when I hear this, there's a couple of things that in what you share there really kind of resonate for me. And it sounds as though what we're talking about in transparency is saying, okay, our approach as a recruiter or as a business, we can't solve all of your problems when it comes to hiring. We can find you a great candidate. We can never find you a perfect candidate because perfect doesn't exist. We can offer you a solution which will resolve much of the troubles and difficulties that you have in your hiring process, but we can't solve them all. This is where we can't solve, but here's the ream of benefits you get from working with us.
Well, can I tell you a quick story? Because I think this is one that, like, as I was going out and talking to people about this, I had gotten a call from an individual who was interviewing. I was his second and final interview for a potential role. And it was going to be a panel, right? Like 4 or 5 people interviewing him. He had gone through kind of a first round a little bit, but as he was prepping for the panel discussion, he reached out to me and he's like, can I just ask you a question? Of course. What do you got? And he's like, well, on the job requirements, it's a SaaS enterprise selling role. One of the bullets said requires 5 years in SaaS, right? In the software as a service industry. He's like, I don't know, Eddie. What should I do? Like, how should I handle that? Like, should I just hope it doesn't come up because they brought me back in? They must like me. Or should I actually address it? And I was like, I know this sounds crazy. And if you don't get the job because of it, I'm sorry. But if it were me, it would be the first thing out of my mouth, right? When you get in front of that panel, lead the discussion by saying, hey, listen, I know you're interested in me. I'm really excited about this opportunity. But before we get too deep into it, there's one thing. It was like your first bullet on your job requirements that says that this individual needs to have 5 years of SaaS selling experience. And as you know, I don't have any. If that's going to be a problem, can we like vet that first and maybe save each other a ton of time? And he was all bought in. He went, did the interview. 2 days later, he got the job and told me that all of the other candidates had the requisite SaaS experience, right? And again, if the truth won't sell it, don't sell it. Like if you're not the right person for the job, you shouldn't be there anyway. But leading with it, built trust, disarmed everybody. They were able to vet that elephant in the room that was going to be the filter by which everybody would be listening. And then he was able to share, hey, this is why I'm a 4.5 candidate versus a 5 candidate, right? I don't have this, but this is what I've got. And magic happens. I'm telling you, it feels good, but it sells better and recruits better too.
So if we were to recommend, if we were going to take an approach to share with recruiters right now, and I love to do this in these sessions, but only give recruiters something tactical that they can go away and do. So one of the things that I often advise is based on a lot of understanding around transparency, reading the books, listening to you talk. I just want to verify that I'm getting this right. So I'm a recruiter and I go to my client and I say, hey, I had to give you a call. I've been speaking to this guy and he has got exceptional skills in one or two areas that I know really matter to your business. The reason I'm calling though is because I'm concerned he doesn't have this particular thing, which is let's say an acceptable flaw, right? We don't expect it to be a bit complete deal breaker. He's still a 4.5 out of 5, but there's something there that I know that if it came up in conversation, if it felt like I'd hidden it, then it might make a bigger deal out of it than if I lead with it. So I go to the client and I say, hey, this guy's got excellent skills in area A and area B. My only concern is he's not quite as good in area C. Would that be a complete deal breaker for you? Or would you want to hear a bit more about his profile? Is that a kind of approach that would fit within the world of transparency, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, I would almost flip it, but that's me because I'm a lunatic. But, by starting with, hey, before we get too deep into it, there's a candidate. They don't have this, but they've got this, this, and this, right? Now, before we get too deep, they don't have this one piece. And so before we waste each other's time, is that going to be a big deal? Because if it is, cool. I'm here to help you. The goal, you don't have to say it, but your goal should always be through the lens of the outcome of that person that you're trying to recruit for, or that person you're trying to place, and making sure that they're in the right position and they're all set up to succeed. And so for me, again, everybody listening, I bet when I said that we all read the negative reviews first, you were like, yeah, that's me. I always do that. And that's why our brain actually needs that, because when you start with this person's awesome at this, but maybe not this, those first two things are going through a BS filter. You got to disarm that filter before they'll even hear what the greatness is, right? And so, again, that's I would almost flip it and start with while they don't have this, they've got this and this. I think that's a better way for our brains to be able to filter and disarm and build that trust.
I hear you. And it's radical, right? It's a real shift in thinking. I don't know whether you have any thoughts on why it's become such a radical kind of idea to lead with transparency, lead with the negative, to show off our risks and our flaws.
Well, it's funny that, I was the CRO of this company. We were doing great. I resigned. There was a guy that was executive at a big technology company called Salesforce. You know them. And he found out 2 weeks later that I was gone. And he had a buddy that was looking for a CRO just like me. So he calls me up and he's frantic. And he's like, Todd, I heard that you're on the market right now. This guy, he's got this role. It's perfect for you. Go do that for a couple of years, build it up. They'll exit. I mean, it's going to be fantastic. And I was like, Andy, I can't, dude. Like, I'm writing a book. And he's like, whoa. Go do this for 2 years and then write the book. Think of the stories you'll have. And I'm like, it's not a memoir. It has to be written right now. And the reason that the right now is so important is, again, all the way to the 1700s. I mean, I found a philosopher, Spanish philosopher, Baltasar Gracian from the 1600s that's talking about being honest and not exaggerating. Like, 1600s, we've always known. Here's the difference, is that today there is a massive proliferation of feedback, reviews on everything we do, buy, and experience. And that's why we have to do it anyway. Like, you can't get away with hiding your flaws and expect, like, hope that they don't find out. Everybody can Google, right? Everybody can Google company name reviews, right? And see reviews on every site from Glassdoor and Indeed and Captel, like, it's everywhere. And now even with ChatGPT and all of the advancements in AI, I keynoted a big company's sales kickoff a few weeks ago. Actually, it was in Orlando. I was in Reading, the UK, a few weeks before that. But the Orlando one, I went to ChatGPT, and all I did was go in and ask, why shouldn't I buy from, and I wrote the company name in there. ChatGPT came up with a 292-word explanation with 4 bullets, and it was pretty brilliant. Like, the 4 bullets were because of this issue, and I'm like, that's insane, right? The point being that today, we always know that honesty sells better than transparency. Trust is the foundation by which you create relationships where they buy more, stay, and advocate. But now we have to do it anyway. Like, you have to do it now. And that's why I'm, like, really screaming from the mountaintops on this, because they're going to find out anyway, and that trust erosion is a deep hole that's well lubricated on both sides. Good luck trying to climb out of that.
Nah, that Chat GPT experience is huge. I can just imagine every recruiter now listening to this tapping into Chat GPT, like, why shouldn't I work for?
Yeah,
that they're hiring for, right? And this goes back to something you mentioned with the Glassdoor piece, and this goes back to something that I've long said to recruiters, which is, if you're a client, if the person you're recruiting for has bad Glassdoor reviews, it's your job to talk to the employer about the fact they've got bad Glassdoor reviews, and talk about how you're going to own it and how you're going to lead a dialogue around that. Because if that comes out, I mean, how often? And this is another question I ask recruiters: how often does a candidate pull out because they've got a dodgy stomach or something's happened, they've got childcare issue, they pull out an interview, you never hear from them again, right? And actually, how often was the reality that they checked a review and they didn't like what came up? And I just really, I see that as a real possibility, and wherever it is a possibility, that we've got to own the narrative, right? I think that's perhaps a phrase that maybe I picked up from you, but really kind of understanding those flaws and leading with them, getting out ahead of them.
Exactly. Like, the number of companies that, like, when I'm doing a keynote on transparency, during the prep call, there was a company a few months ago where their average review score was like a 3.3, and on Glassdoor it was terrible. And I brought it up to the executive, and I was like, listen, like, part of my role here is to bring the outside perspective of, if I at least know how to use Google, which is everybody, here's what I'm going to find, and this is what you're going to be up against. And his initial response was like, don't bring that up. And I'm like, dude, if the truth won't sell it, don't sell it. I'm not your guy, right? Like, my role is to help expose that, because that's what everybody in that audience is going to be up against. That search. So you either own it or you go down with the ship behind that stuff, right? And, like, the own it was, the company had gone through a massive reorg, and they laid people off, and there was a former executive team that didn't do it very well, right? And it caused customers to all of a sudden change reps that didn't know their accounts, and it caused their employees that left to go to Glassdoor and go, these people suck, don't work here. And they went all the way down to a 2.1, and now they were up to a 3.4 again. And just like that messaging around, hey, listen, if you do your homework, this is what you're going to find. Yeah, we screwed that up 18 months ago. We're at 3.4 now. The good news is we were at 2.1, but here's the initiatives that we're doing to make sure that we really, become the 4.5 that we ought to be. And if you're going to struggle with that, cool. Let's address that up front. And they found that all of a sudden magic started happening because customers were finding that and ghosting them. And instead, now they were engaged, and it was based on a foundation of trust.
So it sounds like what you're saying there is if there are negative reviews or a lower review score than you might ideally like, then the thing to do is get hold of that and communicate the change and the trend and communicate the process that you're going through in order to create that change.
Yeah, there's a client that I'm doing a prep call with this afternoon, and I read the reviews before I do the prep call. So I go through. One of the quotes on Glassdoor was, "Worst job I ever had." Right. And so during my prep call with them, with their executives, I'm going to be like, this comes up on page 1 of Glassdoor. Right. And the other reviews around it, what are we going to do about that? Let's strategize around owning that, because again, this is a company that's selling technology to marketers, but those marketers, they're probably reading your Glassdoor reviews too, because you're not just selling a technology, you're building a relationship with people. And if they all hate where they work, that's going to influence your decision to make purchase decisions too. So everybody that's listening should be considering that, not only from a recruiting perspective, but from whatever you're selling, know what's out there and be sure that you're prepared to address it transparently.
Yeah. That's some really good points there. And I'm sure recruiters are making notes or thinking about how they can apply what they've heard so far in the show. I want to change the pace slightly and pick up another topic with you, Todd. Transparency in the world of negotiation, right? As a recruiter, I was typically getting called down on my fees and getting negotiated with every time I wanted to recruit for a client, and put some stuff in place in my sales process to change that. Story for another day. But where negotiation exists, transparency can act as a bit of a lever and a bit of a helper to us, can't it? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, so my perspective on negotiating is a little radical. And it's born in this idea that, for me growing up in sales, I just always thought it was weird that I needed a different personality when it came time to negotiate than I did to sell. Right? If my role is to help build a relationship and build trust and help make sure that you're achieving the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve, and maybe ones you never thought you could, the customer then says, yes, I want to partner with you. And then you go, cool, I'm going to start lying to you now. I'm not going to tell you what a good deal is for me, but I'm going to try to cram this deal down your throat. And as a matter of fact, I learned everything I know about negotiating from former FBI hostage negotiators. What? What are you crazy? That always bothered the crap out of me. I was terrible at it. I come from this lens that, and there's a long story that I don't want to bore people with, but the short version is I got into an intense negotiation on a $4.5 million deal. I walked into a room as a bad negotiator. In the room, they had brought their whole procurement team, and it was a multi-billion-dollar company, and these were professional negotiators. And so instead of doing battle with them, I just threw my cards face up. I told them, hey, listen, there's 4 things that matter to us in our organization, and I'm going to write them on the whiteboard, and maybe they can be a basis for the discussion that we're going to have. And those 4 levers were volume, so how much you buy, timing of cash, so how fast you pay, length of commitment, so how long you commit, and then timing of the deal or when you sign. Those are the 4 levers of every for-profit company in the world. How much you buy, how fast you pay, how long you commit, and then predictability and forecast and when you sign. They immediately asked for a discount. They're like, that's fascinating. We need 30% off. And instead of going, FBI hostage negotiator or ping pong is, can't do 30, but I can do 15. And they're like, we need 25. Like, how's 20? Right? Like, that's the ping pong. Or you go into your, haven't we talked about how valuable the solution is? Like, that ship sailed. You go back through the levers. And that's what I did. I was like, hey, listen, maybe we've got an opportunity to get you close. Commit to more volume. Can we do that? Pay us faster. Can we do that? They could. Commit longer. Can we do that? help us forecast. Let's mutually align around timing. I can help you there. And in the end, every dollar or concession you give away in the form of a discount, you're paying for something. You're getting some value back versus the being a charitable donation to their customers' bottom line with your free discounts. And that's where this whole negotiation concept comes from, is you can share transparently how you price, right? Based on, depending on what kind of recruiting firm or recruiting you're doing, hey, commit to more headcount, like more roles that we're going to seek to fill. Pay faster, commit over a longer period of time. Help us forecast when you're going to be doing, like, you've got to figure out what those levers are for you. But when that ends up happening is nobody's ready for that. And you end up building trust and giving your customer the cards face up to negotiate their own deal. And when they come back to you, they know what the levers are. And in the end, you end up with more valuable transactions built on a bed of trust instead of eroding it right at the goal line. Hopefully you end up with more predictable opportunities too. And in the end, when we talk about it's transparency and cards face up, like, here's my pricing model, but transparency up front is just making sure that, I've always been a believer in making sure that you're sharing pricing range, something like that from the first discussion. Like, I got a call tomorrow morning with a company that I think from the outside isn't going to be able to afford me. I can see it. And my first sentence that I'm going to have with them is, hey, before we get too deep into this, based on your company size and what you're looking to do, the range for an investment in somebody like me is between X and Y. If that's going to be way off the rails, let's talk about that. And if it is off the rails, I'm happy to make a couple of recommendations for you. Start the conversation with it. That's pricing transparency and negotiating transparency all in one.
The double factor. I really like that.
Standing out in your sector is becoming harder than ever. Lots of people are making noise, saturating the market with the same old droll tones. So if you want to stand out, it's time to start a podcast. Yes, there's loads of podcasts out there, but how many of them are actually in your niche? Do any of them speak to your perspective on the market? I didn't think so. Podcasting not only sets you apart as an innovative thinker in your market, it is great content for repurposing. Here at Search That, we help you become the voice of your industry. We can stretch your content and turn it into a content goldmine, leveling up your personal brands and recruitment marketing in the process. Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, to find out more, head over to searchthat.co.uk/podcasts.
Just in that last piece, I think we'll step back into negotiation in a moment, but just in that last piece around pricing negotiation, what I love about that approach is that it then opens the conversation around your value and why you're priced at that point. Recruiters often talk to me or ask me about, should they occupy a space that is more expensive? And I kind of say, well, if you don't, then everyone expects the same service and experience that they've had before, right? Unless you are upfront about your pricing and your pricing is more than your competition, then how can you kind of almost miss an opportunity to justify have a conversation about value, which actually for listeners, there's another episode in this series where I talked to John Brooks, who's the pricing specialist for the recruitment industry. I think you and he would get on really well, Todd. But just stepping back into that negotiation space, there's also this point around these four levers, and I love that approach where you lay out from the outset what it is that it will take for what you need to take away from this deal in order to be happy and in order to be able to give that price reduction. So you mentioned, remind me, those four levers were...
It's volume. Yeah, so volume. So how much services that you're looking to consume, product, technology, licenses, whatever. So that's number one, volume.
We're talking about like we're probably talking about number of hires, right? In the recruitment.
Is that engaged? Probably.
Okay. Let's think about how many hires you're going to make. Okay, cool.
Right. So that's number one. Number two is the timing of cash or timing of payment. And the reason that I always share that one is, like, my pricing is net 30, and I try to time a company paying for my services, which are keynotes, workshops, that kind of stuff. I want payment to align with delivery. And normally there's a deposit, right? And so I share that up front. Like my pricing is net 30 on invoice. There's a deposit, so I can do all the prep work. And then there's delivery, like timing, payment to align with that. Number 3 is the length of commitment. So how long do you commit to the product, technology, services, whatever it is? So you're going to go, hey, we're going to fill a certain number of roles over a certain period. The longer the commitment, the better. And then the 4th one is...
This could be a tricky one for recruiters. I think it's worth just jumping in there to disambiguate, because there is this, you could be thinking about the duration, like a recruiter might be thinking about the duration it takes to make one hire. In my world, that is much more about, okay, what's the duration, the time frame of how long we're going to agree, let's say an exclusive agreement, right? So let's say...
Yes.
If you agree to work with us for the next 6 months, is this actually, if we make that agreement for 12 months and you're happy to trust us for a 12-month period and review it at that point, then we can actually give you a couple of percentage points off the overall investment as a result of that level of kind of transparency and trust.
And I'm also thinking about it from like if you're a contingent recruiter and you've got a guarantee period, that length of commitment, you could flip that into a guarantee period that, hey, our pricing is based on how many roles we're filling. My payment is aligned to, X, like we do a deposit or whatever. Length of commitment could be that guarantee period. Our guarantee period's 90 days. And then, if they get into the negotiation, we're like, well, we need 180 days. How would you handle that? Well, you go, as you recall, our pricing is based on these 4 things. One of which is the pricing that you have for our services is based on 90-day guarantee period. If you want it to be 180 days, we can discuss that, but we're probably going to have to look at exchanging it for something else. Are there additional roles that we can seek to fill? Can we pay faster? Whatever those happen to be, that's the way that you look at it instead of no, it's 90 days, right? Oh, screw you. It's, hey, listen, our pricing's based on 90. If you need to move that, cool, but we're going to have to shift some other lever. That's the magic in this is, again, you're giving the tools to the customer to negotiate their own deal. And more often than not, like I see this a lot on payment terms where a customer's like, hey, we need net 60 payment terms. And you're like, well, your pricing is based on net 30. If we want net 60, you can, but something else is going to have to change in here. The number of times in my business where customers are like, all right, we'll just leave it at net 30. Like it just goes away versus we can do net 45. And then you just gave away 15 days of time. And now they're going, that was easy. What else can we ask for? Right. So you just got to be careful with the giving away of free stuff. Always use the levers.
And so the transparency works both ways, right? So it's not only saying this is how you get to the end goal that you want, but it's like, actually, this is what I'm sacrificing in order to help you get to that point. I'm actually showing you that I'm willing to bend rather than just bending, like rather than just kind of saying, oh yeah, I'll do whatever you ask. We're actually showing our calculation and showing the value that we're contributing to the relationship as we go through that, if I'm understanding it right.
Exactly. You're not, I know it's a little harder for like a startup or if you're filling your first positions, like, yeah, you might want to take a little bit less, but if you've been doing this for a while, your pricing should be your pricing, right? And there should be things that you are willing to trade for. For me, again, I'm doing talks and I'm doing workshops. If a customer's asking for some dollars off, commit to more programs. Pay me faster. Like, that's good. Commit to a longer period of time of my programs and workshops. Or, even help me predict my business, which is that 4th lever, which is the timing of the deal. My ability to figure out my own resourcing. Because, the only thing I have to convert to revenue is my time. Right? There's no more time. And if I could predict what those time requirements are going to be, that helps my business quite a bit. And that's something that in many cases I'm willing to pay for in the form of a couple dollars off, maybe a little slower payment term, maybe a shorter commitment, like whatever that is. You've got to understand what that is for your business. The difference here, though, I just want to reiterate, is I always, when I talk about that, we get these questions about well, what if they won't have it? What if I'm telling you, nobody is negotiating like this. And when you do, the whole relationship changes to where instead of it's the haymaker, VP of HR that you're dealing with or procurement or whatever, it's somebody that's just like, oh, you know what? This person runs a business and has confidence in their pricing model. And there's a reason why they're successful. And they have given me the cards to figure out how best to work with them in a flexible way that also helps me hit my budgets or KPIs or whatever it happens to be too. You end up establishing a partnership where it's partner and partner instead of it being, customer and recruiter, right? Vendor. So that's the whole point here is you build that relationship on trust, cards face up.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of this, and I've seen it work for me in my business, and particularly the start in my business as well. And you know what, when you start out, and again, there'll be some people listening to this who just set up their own agency. When you start out, everyone smells blood. They're like, I can get this guy to compromise on fees. I can get this guy's price. Oh, you're new. Oh, well, in that case, we're paid off. That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the other thing here, Todd, that I hear in this negotiation piece is the fact that what you also do is you make sure that everybody pays fairly, right? And
exactly.
Once you do that, you're kind of going into reading a great book on ethics at the moment by a guy called Michael Scher, who wrote The Good Place, and in it, just a chapter that I was reading just now, he talks about this idea that there's a school of ethics that says you should kind of, the way to get to an ethical outcome is to think about creating rules that nobody would veto, that nobody would say no to. And it feels to me like transparent negotiation, where everybody gets a fair price based on the variables that you're prepared to be variable on, or you're prepared to flex on, is exactly like that. It's surely a principle that nobody would veto.
Exactly. And especially during the period of the Great Resignation that we had, and now kind of the purge period that we're in, people are changing jobs, right? And those are people that are probably going to, in some cases, bring you to their next opportunity. Like, I don't know how you're doing business development for your own businesses, but for me, it's all inbound referral. I do work with like a speaker bureau agency, but it's all inbound referral, upsell, cross-sell. And like the minute you start eroding your own price, that becomes a race to the bottom in your own business, because those people, like my calls even over the last couple of weeks, are from companies and individuals who were at other companies that are now at new companies that are like, Todd, we need you to do that same thing again. Now, if I radically discounted and made everything so like cheap, that would be hurting my business, because now my ROI on my time's gone down too. And it's just, again, keeps going down, down, down. Your pricing is based on something. Share it up front. Make sure the variables provide for some flexibility for your potential customers, and just watch trust build and upsell, cross-sell, maintain those margins that you need to maintain and build a great business.
Yeah, you never want the referral that starts with, hey, work with Todd, he's really flexible on price. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And like, oh, we got this price from him, you can get you, right? Like, crap, like in the recruiting space, it's like, if it's like 25% or whatever it is, and you discount it down to 15%, and then that person goes to another company, they're calling you and going, hey, we want to work with you at 15%. And like, you're already screwed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so look, let's do one final gear change if we can for the next couple of minutes. So there's one extra piece in the transparent sales leader, which, look, if you're a recruitment business owner, leader, manager, or someone aspiring to be a manager, you absolutely need to check out Todd's book. You've heard him speak today for the last 45 minutes or so, and it's been an excellent conversation. But Todd in the book talks about how to motivate a team, particularly amongst a setting of remote sales teams, right? So this is a huge shift, and the world's changed quite a lot, even since the transparency sale came out. But can you tell us a little bit about where this kind of interest in, you talked about at the start, the kind of behavioral psychology and the way that people are motivated. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it fits in with the role of a transparent sales leader right now?
Yeah, I mean, so the new book was based on this idea that, kind of at the high level, that when I first got promoted into revenue leadership, sales leadership, or even building businesses, so this is appropriate for small or big, that I come from the sales world where I always had a process, a structure, excuse me. I get into leadership or building a business, and I felt like I was a dog chasing a car down the street every day, right? Like, where's my structure and my process? I'm a leader. Like, what? So I created a framework for revenue leadership or building revenue capacity in organizations. And so the book's framework is based on that. It's called the 5 F's of building revenue capacity. But the 5th F out of those 5 is something I call fun. But fun isn't like cupcakes and lollipops. Fun is a culture that is ripe with intrinsic inspiration or intrinsic motivation. And what I mean by that is, what revenue leaders have ever been taught what actually drives people, what actually drives their people to show up, to stay, and to do their best, and to become advocates for you and your organization. So that fun piece, I've got a whole section dedicated to, and it's something I call the praise framework. Because as it turns out, there's 6 things that drive us intrinsically. All right, so just for anybody that doesn't know, or before you get out your dictionary, intrinsic means things that are driven within you. Extrinsic would be external motivators like cash or trophies or fear or that sort of thing. So what intrinsic inspiration means at its core, and from a sales perspective, it goes back to this old axiom that we always believe that salespeople are money motivated, and I believe that to be true. If you're doing it wrong, that I believe that if we create environments where we are intrinsically inspired, and then variable compensation or the money becomes the reward for doing work we love to do instead of the reason we do it, that's when everybody wins, right? And so that's the concept here. And I'm happy to share what the praise model is if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. So take us through it. So praise model, focus on intrinsic motivation, understanding intrinsic motivation, and that differentiated out from extrinsic motivation. When you mentioned kind of that idea of feeling like a dog chasing a car and feeling like a sales leader without a process, I've seen that. So many recruitment businesses that I've been involved in where the leaders are like, right, we need the guys doing more sales day, or we need the guys to sound more upbeat on the phone. Dress down day, it's so reactionary, a little bit random, and I'm not digging out the leaders. I agree with you. I think we need a little bit more support. So what is the praise model?
Well, yeah, so the praise model is basically the 6 things that drive us intrinsically, right? And so alliterative, because I'm a nerd and I needed to make it something I could remember. So praise, P-R-A-I-S-E, the P is predictability, meaning we as human beings, we do our best work when we can predict, when there's consistency. When we go to bed at night, we know what we're getting ourselves into the next morning. So if you've got an environment or you're in an environment where every day when you wake up, there's inconsistency, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, your leaders are inconsistent, they're in a good mood, they're in a bad mood, nobody's addressed the economy in your company. And so they're all like, everything's great when everybody else is getting, like all their friends are getting laid off. That's unpredictability. That's inconsistency. We don't sleep as well. When we don't sleep as well, we don't perform as well. We're less creative. So the P is predictability. We do our best work when there's predictability. The R is then recognition. We do our best work when we are recognized for our efforts, right? Validated. That there's status available, like, sometimes titles, people are intrinsically inspired for that great title, but recognition means that you're actually being recognized for your effort over and above the dollars that show up in your paycheck or however your customers are paying you. And there's a couple of stories that I tell in the book, but one quick one is how even having internal contests amongst my sales teams, where their prize was going to be a $100 bill that we were going to come out and deliver to them with pomp and circumstances on a deal that they were probably going to make $2 or $3 grand of variable compensation on. They jumped over each other for that $100 bill and the recognition and their name up on the board, right? So the R is recognition. The third one is A, which is aim, or the aim of your work. We do our best work when our work matters beyond our paycheck, beyond our metrics, beyond our forecast. beyond deal to deal, meaning that we're making an impact. There's a mission behind this, that our work matters to the individuals that we are selling to. It matters to their customers, that there's an outcome beyond just hitting a number, right? And that was to your point about the virtual world. That was one of those things that I saw that we really missed out on, is I think we forgot that our work matters beyond our numbers, and we overcompensated on the next couple, and we undercompensated on aim. All right, so that third one is aim. The fourth one, I, is independence. We do our best work when we are given a certain level of independence. We're trusted. We're given the resources to do our best work. We're not micromanaged, right? Micromanagement is the opposite of independent. And when we have that independence, we do better work than when we have somebody over our shoulder. All right, so that's the I. The S, security, right? And I'm sure you've seen this a billion times, but we do our best work when we feel safe and secure, like somebody has our back, when we're part of a team, when we're part of a pack, right? Like imagine being in the Serengeti thousands of years ago. If you're by yourself, you're in, like survival mode. You're not performing your best. You're not sleeping your best. You're living in fear. The minute you're part of a pack, all you have to do is be a little faster than the slowest person. You suddenly start to calm down and feel like you're a part of something. That was the part that we overcompensated on during the virtual world, with the virtual happy hours and, dress like a clown day or whatever that crap is. And we forgot about aim and independence. And then the last one is the E, which is equitability, meaning we do our best work when there's equitability, meaning things are fair, right? That I'm being paid, and all of these other rewards from the other 5 letters here balance the effort in my time, my resources, my money, whatever it happens to be, that there's balance between the two, right? It's not just the dollars, but the minute there's politics injected in an organization, or certain people, based on how buddy they are with the boss, or genders or races or whatever, the minute we see there's an unfairness going on, our intrinsic inspiration goes in the toilet instantly, right? So it's predictability, recognition, aim, independence, security, equitability. Those are your 6 things that, if as a leader, you internalize. But if you're recruiting, or if you're a candidate, those are the things you're looking for. You're not just looking for the dollars, right? You're looking for a balance between all 6 of those things. That's when we all do our best work, and the environments where, I know for me, I've never had so much fun than in the organizations that have balanced out praise.
And this is going to be the kind of closing thought here, but this is my main takeaway from the praise model, right? Which is, how many recruiters understand the role of intrinsic motivation, i.e. what fundamentally gets people to do good work for their candidates? And when we apply that praise model, when you go to an employer and you say, hey, look, I know you want me to recruit this role, the way we're going to get the best talent in the market to want to come and work for you and love working for you and stay working for you is if we can articulate the 6 areas that make up the praise model. If we can get people kind of understanding that predictability, recognition, aim, independence, security, and equitability, if we can share those with them in the advert, and when we talk about the REM, in the interview process, that's where you're going to secure or be salute to the best talent in the industry.
Exactly. That's it. And it became magic for me, not only as somebody trying to build a culture in my organizations, but when I would have somebody come and, like, I had a rep resign, right? And when they came and resigned, I was like, what's going on? And they're like, well, I'm going to go get paid more over here. Like, all right, cool. Well, congrats. That's great. There had to have been a morning, though, where you woke up and you're like, you know what? I'm going to take that recruiter call today. What happened? Then I got quiet. And then they started sharing, like, I didn't, they started sharing feelings that all filled into the praise thing. So their discussion about why they left was extrinsic, but the real reasons that drove them were intrinsic. And those are great learning opportunities for me as a leader, right? So you could start to use it to figure out the true meaning of things that you can actually act on. And so I just encourage everybody to think about that with what you're doing today as a recruiter in your organizations. How do I feel about the praise model in what I'm doing today? But then also apply it to your recruiting and as a coaching opportunity for your customers that you're trying to sell to. And that's where the magic happens. And that's where tenures extend and where performance goes up.
Todd, it's such great work. I've really enjoyed this conversation. We got up a couple of weeks ago, and I knew that we were going to run to time today, and I knew that we'd have a really, really fun conversation to share with the audience. I just want to say a really, really big thank you to you for sharing everything you have, for writing the books, and for being genuinely like a really great guy to get to know and spend some time with. So thank you, Todd. I will include in the show notes all the links to of where to find you and how to get hold of your books. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap this up?
I'll leave you with one last quote from sales history. It's from 1911. It's from a guy named Arthur Sheldon in his book, The Art of Selling. His quote is, "True salesmanship is the science of service. Grasp that thought firmly and never let go." Remember that when you've got to put on your sales hat as a recruiter, sales does not have to be plaid jackets and gold chains, right? True sales is the science of service. You're providing a service. Grasp that thought firmly and never let go. You're going to love what you do and you're going to thrive as a result. So that's my parting thought for today.
Awesome. Todd, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. That was a blast.
Fair. Todd, that was so cool. Honestly, really, really appreciate it. I know we're right up to time. I suspect you've got very important places to be. You mentioned time is dollars for you as well as it is for me. So, yeah, look, honestly, really, really grateful to share some time with you. Couple of things I'd love to share with you as follow up. I will make sure you've got a copy of the show before, so you can have a look through it before we push go. We'll also send you some materials in terms of promoting the episode when it comes up. If you're happy to share those out.
Yeah.
To your audience. Is there anything else you think you need from me?
No, not at all, man. It's this is fun. We could probably have done another one too. So, like down the road, if you want me back on, give me a shout.
I'd really love that. And you know what? As I say, there is something that I have in the back of my mind that I want to get. I'd love to get your opinion on, because like I'm doing it. I feel like I'm doing a really good job with the stuff that I'm doing, but I'm a small fish. And if I was going to write a book, it would be on a thing called Techler, and I'd love to show you what Techler is. And what it does. It's all about account expansion. It's all about generating more revenue from existing clients. So
nice.
It might be something you'd be well positioned to give me some kind of feedback around. And
yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, cool.
Maybe it can be something that you enjoy reading too. So yeah, appreciate it. Let's get in touch, eh?
Perfect. I think you need to take us off air so this can finish uploading before I hang out.
Yeah, I think that's right. Let me